Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm George Moss, again here at allpointstv.com, and we're coming to you at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Monday, one day after Mother's Day. And I hope all the mothers out there had a wonderful time being treated by your children who should respect you and honor you for all the great things that you do. I can tell you that I was elated of the opportunity to give witness to my own mother yesterday on Facebook, and I wrote an article about who Elaine Foster Moss was, and so I always want to give a shout out to moms. I knew what my mom was to me and what kind of influence she had in my life, and continued to influence my life as I began to understand her more and more. You know, I was saying in my post yesterday that very few of us understand who our parents are. You know, we don't understand them when we are children because, you know, we have our own way of looking at things based on our limited understanding. And we just can't understand what they're talking to us about because they're speaking into a prism of ignorance that is the natural cohabitant with youth. You know, we have all the answers when we're young. And I remember seeing that one sign in one of the barber shops that said, "Quick, move out where you have all the answers." And I had so many answers when I was a child, and I just didn't think my mom had any answers. And I can't remember which one it was. It was either Will Rogers or it was Mark Twain that said, when I was 14 years old, when I was 14 years old, I had the most ignorant father in the universe. And he said it was just amazing what my father learned in 7 years. So from 14 to plus 7 years at 21 years old, when he became an adult, his father, all of a sudden got smarter, and that's what happened to me. My mom would always tell me, by the way, she would say when I got mad at my mom because she was telling me I couldn't do what the other kids in the neighborhood were doing, because my mother had my future in mind, I had playing in mind. And when I would get mad at my mom, which was probably every day, because my mom's rules were every day, and my mom would say to me, because she wasn't changing the rules, these rules were non-negotiable. And my mom would say to me, if you think I'm wrong, just live long enough. And, you know, being youthful and being ignorant and being stupid and all the words that go along with it that show that you didn't know anything, I just didn't think my mom would be proven correct given any amount of time between what she was saying as a verdict and was really the proof of that verdict in the future. And I had that Mark Twain or Will Rogers experience where, as I got older, my mom became wiser. And now she's a genius.
Yeah, growing up when I did, my parents were already older than my was my mom's second marriage, you know, and so my parents were already older when they had my sister and I, and they were older than our peers, you know, peers' parents were, you know, they so my parents were like, you know, they're stoical, kind of taciturn, stick in the muds, where my friends' parents, a lot of them were like hippies. You know, kind of like, you know, just that part of the generation. And it was like my mom and dad just like sat around and looked bewildered at the way these people were like living their lives. But, you know, ultimately a lot of them did come to my parents because they did have a pretty stable, my parents had gone through a lot already, you know, and stuff. So they were kind of a source of information for my friends' parents. You know, they used to come to them to ask for advice, you know. So my parents are very, I mean, they learned a lot already. And then, so, I mean, that was, but yeah, I never thought my parents were all that restrictive because I guess I was never one to be eager to want to try a lot of stuff. I mean, I guess I was kind of very conservative by nature is a good expression. I think genetically, you know, I just like, you know, why you do this is stupid. You could get hurt. It's risky. You could get in trouble. You're going to get busted. I really didn't like dealing with police officers even at the early age. So, I mean, I just was kind of conservative at that point. And all the other guys I knew were all more bolder and stuff. Yeah, they had a lot more kids than I did, but they also usually served a prison term. So I try to avoid that. You know?
Yeah. And you're talking about what age here when you're getting these kinds of insights?
Oh, yeah. I don't know. I just seemed like I always had kind of a. My parents were ones that you could actually. They would tell you life experience of other people and why they were saying not to do. They'd explain stuff to a certain degree. They'd tell you no immediately when they wanted to stop something from progressing. But later on, they'd say the reason why we did this, and they'd give illustrations, and it was like that was eye opening. And yeah, I mean, I just a lot of people I grew up with are now either gone because they're drugs, and they also lived a
Isn't that the truth?
dissipated lifestyle.
Yeah.
I mean, I just talked to a friend of mine today. A lot of the peer group that we grew up with, this one junior high school we all both went to, I'd say probably easily over a third of these people are probably gone already.
Yeah, I'm going back to my roots next year to Birmingham, Alabama, and I know when I get there, I won't recognize a lot of people that are in the area in which I grew up because a lot of those persons have deceased. You know, they were the ones that Gwendolyn Brooks was talking about when she wrote this poem called, you know, We Real Cool. She says, we real cool. We left school. We jazz June. We die soon. And a lot of people that I was coming up with, I didn't understand it. A lot of people were disappearing really in the high schools. You know, it'd be there one day and they're gone. The next day somebody shot them. And I couldn't understand all this this trauma around me. But there were people that were doing things they shouldn't have been doing. And they got caught up in a situation that their immaturity could not get them out of because they're making adult decisions with a childlike understanding of what it was they were doing and did not know where the minefields are. And I gained an understanding when I was seeing people disappear like that. I began to understand that one commandment where it says, honor their father and their mother, that their days shall be long upon the land upon which the Lord thy God has given thee. And I understood that then as a child, because I knew that what I was saying were some people deceasing early because they did not have the understanding their parents would have had, and they didn't honor their parents. They were in defiance of their parents. And the parents would allow them to be defiant of them, and what happened is they made an early doom. They would not admit if they listened to the parents who understood all these minefields out here, where the ditches were, and where the travesty was waiting down the road to entrap them. And by not understanding that, they fell into those crevices that your parents could have warned you about. But I had a mom, and that's why I was celebrating her yesterday. I had a mom that wasn't buying what I now know is my nonsense. It wasn't nonsense then, but I'm looking back at it now. It was told nonsense. But that's it. That's what children are not going to ever get it right. And this idea that you're born with an innate understanding of your parents, that's not ever going to be the case. And I've read some studies of what a person was saying, just some case situations that of things that were said about children in the most ancient of times. And it reads like it was in the newspaper yesterday. I read some comments made by Socrates, not Socrates, but a Socrates, and with an I. And it's amazing what a Socrates said. And if you take the comment he made and then take the comments being made about youth right now, there's not that much difference between the two, because youth has always been this kind of force in society, or even maybe it's what Thomas Sowell wrote about. I forget which book it was in, but in one of his books, in the very introduction of the book, he said that barbarians are born into the world every day. And every generation has upon its hands the chore of a civilizing mission, because with every generation born into the world, there must be a civilization effort that has been imparted to the youth as you're bringing them into the world as barbarians, making sure that they negotiate with society to the extent that they create a certain amount of civility. And that is a mission that if you don't do that, then the barbarians take over. And we are seeing some signs of that. We're seeing a lot of cracks in the wall. And we're seeing what happens when you have an untutored generation come up and they're not, in fact, tutored by the generation that preceded them. And you see the chaos that brings about. But Elaine Foster Moss, and I will forever sing her praises for as long as there's breath in my body, and that is that I will always praise her for not buying my nonsense. One of the things I said in my post yesterday as I was giving honor to my mother was that one thing I can say is that as confused as I was as a child, I didn't think it was confusion at the time, but as confused as I now know that I was as a child, I can say this resolutely and absolutely, and that is there was no confusion about the rules of my household because those rules were non-negotiable. I mean, I had a clear understanding of what was expected of me, and I also knew the result of when I defied those rules, because the consequences were not a matter of if. It was not a matter of if the consequences would be imposed. There was no question about that. If I found out that that was a violation of them, then it was a certainty of the imposition of the consequences. And I didn't understand that as my mother was imposing that. My mom would always tell me that not only would she say, if you think I'm wrong, live long enough, but my mom, in terms of imposing her will upon my will, would say to me as she was imposing herself physically in my space, my mom would say that this has hurt me more than it's hurting you. And I don't think any child on the planet has ever believed that at that age. And I certainly believe in what was said to me at the age I was. But by around 12 or 13, though, I really didn't have too much defiance left, because my mom kind of imposed herself within my space at such a young age. By the time I turned 12 or 13, I pretty much had it down to a science, because I wanted to avoid what I had faced as consequences when I was in the youth of my youth, at the beginning of my youth. And I had it pretty much down by the time I turned 12 or 13. I was pretty much directed and focused at that point. And that's what made me a good student in high school and things of that sort. By the time I got to be a ninth grader, around 14, I think around maybe 13 in my case, because I finished high school at 17. And I finished high school at 17 because my mom in 7th grade wanted me to go to summer school for double promotion. And so I went to summer school. You could go, at that time you could go to summer school and study the next grade level in the summer, and went back, you skipped over a grade. So I skipped over from grade 4, went from grade 4 to grade 6. And so I finished high school at 17 years old. And that was my mom pushed me forward because she saw I was being slowed down by the process I was in a grade that I didn't belong in, because my IQ level was higher than my grade level. And so my mom wanted me to push me up to where that would be a matching circumstance of my own ability to the classroom instruction. And I didn't find it there either, but it was, I'm not saying I was super smart, I'm just simply saying that I understand now what my mom was doing. And I have so many different experiences where I have so many positive remembrances of that, which were not positive at the time, but very positive now. And I said in my post yesterday that I used my mom's name as my password into my computer when I open my computer up to type my articles. For example, that I do an article every day on Facebook. When I open my computer up to do my articles, I always use some form of my mom's name. And when I was at the university, you had to change your password every 90 days for security purposes. And so I had to be very creative in terms of using some form of the name or another. Sometimes they would write me back. They would deny the use. They say, you already used it once before. Because I was going back and forth, I would use some numbers, but I never would use a number. Here's one thing I never did. You have to use 8 letters, and they want you to use at least one number, because the letters, everybody can figure the letters out, but the number would be something that they don't know where you put the number. So I would always put the number 1. I would never use a 2 or a 3 or a number 4. I would put a number there, and it would be 1. I might put Elaine Foster Moss 1, or I might put Elaine 1 Foster Moss, something like that. But I would never put anything other than one because my mom was at the apex of the things that got me behind the desk where I am. And I criticized some of the people yesterday in this post. I won't be long on this because I want to say some other things before I leave the studio. But I said some things about those who have been on national television programs, and they would make critical comments about their mom. I was very critical of those persons yesterday, and I would name some of the persons I talked about: Chris Carter, and a person, he's jerk number 2, and this other jerk, Brian Gumble. And I can't believe some of the things either one of those men would say. I couldn't say that. I couldn't get on national television or get in any public place and say the things about my mom. And I'll say this. I didn't say this in my post yesterday, but I'll say this here on the air. I have a friend. Every once in a while, he'll call me up because he has gotten some estrangement in his relationship, in his marriage. And the reason why he calls me up is because he knows what I'm going to tell him, and that is basically, you know how you say, "You be blessed," Elton John song. Well, my message to him, because I know him pretty well, is one of my best friends, doesn't mean I don't critique him, and that I cannot be critiqued by him. But as Elton John says, "You be blessed." Okay, I say, when I'm talking to him, I tell him, "You be the problem." I sat down with him and his wife one time, and I was sitting over here, and wife was sitting here, and he was sitting over there. He was sitting here. His wife was sitting over there. I mean, in front of me. And I let them talk for a few minutes. I already made up my mind what the problem was, because I know this guy very well. And so after we went round in the places where they wanted to go with the conversation, and we got them everybody calmed down enough to be able to hear the other person talking. I said after maybe about 20 minutes of talking, I said, "Now, okay, I think I've heard enough. And now let's all focus our attention on the problem. And we're going to all look at the ones causing the problem." And I said, everyone look over here, and the person here, you keep your eyes where they are. And it's amazing what humor can do in terms of any kind of negotiation, because once you get people to start laughing about themselves, then you break some of the tension, because people don't admit that they are bringing anything to the table. I mean, it's all the other person's fault, and they're perfect. And it's just, if I can just get someone to be as perfect as I am, then I would have a smooth sailing. But the other person's causing all the problems. I'm in here, I'm doing everything right. And that's the way that they view anything that comes up. And I've been there, so I understand how that works. You know, your eyes are made to look outward. Unless you look in the mirror, you can't look. You're not made to look inward. You need to do that. That's a third eye that have you doing that. And every time he calls me up and want to go out and talk about what's a situation, my first statement to him is this: so and so, and I know his childhood. I know the abandonment that he went through, and I say, look, forgive your mom. You know, I was raised by my mom and not my dad. He was raised by his dad and not his mom. And so the first thing I say when he started telling me about all the problems and things of that sort, my first response is, forgive your mom. Because this retaliation that you're involved in is not going to resolve your problems. And he came back and told me later on, after talking about he wanted this, he wanted that, he wanted a divorce. He didn't want any of that. He wanted to get rid of the problem, but that would have to be take your hand, if your right hand, take your right hand, put it in the back of your collar, and then throw yourself out. Because that's what the problem is. And I can tell you from personal experience. Anyway, my mom was was that soldier, and her rules in the household were the rules she set up, and it's amazing how those rules become the household, our own households when we become adults, because we set those same rules. I read that from Whoopi Goldberg, who said when she was 16 years old, her rules were so oppressive. And she said when she had her own daughter, and daughter turned 16 years old, she was amazed at how many of those rules her mom had that she put in her own household. And those were the rules her own daughter had to follow. And that's the way it is. I mean, that's just the repetition of doing the same thing over again, generation after generation, and getting the results that every generation has to get if they're going to have barbarians brought into civility. And if you stop doing that, I'm telling you right now, you're not going to be safe. And I can go in any community and tell you where the parents are doing that job of civility and where they're not doing their job. In those communities, people are walking around and they're vibrant. And I went to a place the other day up here in Frankenmuth, and I can tell you some things about Frankenmuth that I see there that I don't see in Flint. And I know, and when I ride through Frankenmuth, I ride through there looking at all the houses, and I have not yet seen, I've been throughout that community, because I go ride around just to look and see what is happening there. I have not seen one bar up to the window, and I have not seen any bars up to the doors. And I don't even see heavy doors. I see these doors you can kick in, and then I come into the Flint area, and every house is gated. And that tells me all I need to know. And I know a lot when people get on television and say bad things about their mom. You don't tell me anything else about those persons. Those persons have absolutely no character. And even if my mom had not been the force of my life that she was and continues to be, 37 years in her absence, and she's more of an influence in many ways now because I'm able to embed in my memory the things that she stood for. And if I can be half of that, I'll leave this alone. But I will say this, when I go to, I feel like my mom is gone, and I'm like an ambassador right now. I have to represent Elaine Foster Moss more now because of her absence, and people have to see her through what she produced, because fruit doesn't fall very far from the tree. And so I want them to recognize who she was through what she produced. And when I go to the store, it's really interesting the dynamics that go on there, because they are commercialists, right? They are involved in trade, and they want your money. And so they've done some things in that store to make sure that they get your money, because that's what you went to the store to spend money. But you went there with some items on your mind to spend your money, and they're there to sell you some stuff you intend to go there. And that's why they put the food stuffs in the store. That's to keep you there. You know how they serve in different parts of the store. You start standing there, and they give you a little bit of this, a cup to prick your appetite. Before you know it, you're over there buying some of that. Or at least you're staying in the store longer. And the longer you stay in the store, the chances are you're going to buy more stuff. Anyway, to get you to come back at the end of the travel around the store, those stores are organized. If you notice that the fruit is on the side as you're going around, you know why? They know you're going to the back of the store where the meat is. The meat will never be in any store you go into in the front of the store. Check that out. The meat is always in the back, because they know first and foremost, we're all, carnivores. So they know you come in the store to buy meat. But if you got the meat in the front of the store, you're not going to go around where the rest of the stuff is. So they got you on a long tour of the stores. In the very back of the store, 5 miles down the aisles, in the back of the store, that's where the meat section is. Go and check that out in all the stores. Now ask yourself, why is that? Because the store is organized. And then at the end of the store, because you got some change left, and you're not spending, you got all the dollar stuff is out there. All the high mark dollar store is out there. The $4 and $5 stuff and the $1 stuff is in the front of the store. The candy, the cookies, they got that in front of the store, so that the money you have not spent, they take that as you get ready to exit out the store, and then they want you to come back. So that's where the person at the counter is, and they're giving you a lot of respect, and so on and so forth. Here's where my mom comes in. I'm in the store, and they're treating me nicely, and I know it's for a commercial reason, but it may well be because some people's mothers have trained them into civility. And I know that their mom, if that is the case, did not teach them anything that my mom did not teach me. Therefore, as long as they're nice, I'm going to be nice. And until they stop talking, I'm not going to stop talking. They don't understand that. And they look up because they're still saying nice, and I'm saying things. And I meant them to look up because they can't believe I'm still talking. They said, "Thank you for coming." And I said, "Thank you for your time." And they can't believe that I'm still talking. I get that all the time. And the reason why I do that is because I want them to meet the woman that trained me into what I became, and I'm still becoming, as my understanding increases about who my mom was. I'm still finding out some things about her that really, continues to surprise me. But that's just the way it is going to be until I have no other breath in my body, because I do respect what caused me to be the person that I became. Not saying I'm in a big deal, but I do know why I was behind a desk all my career. And I was behind that desk. I have my computer on my desk right now, and all the things I do behind a desk on a computer, I do it because my mom put me there. I didn't put myself there. And so I hope the bottom line is, I hope you had a nice Mother's Day. And for those of you out there that still have your mom with you, let me just tell you from experience, to honor your mother and your father, but it's different. It's a little bit. Now I don't know what it was in other people's lives. My mom raised me, so I can't say what it's like if you're a two-parent household. I was in a single-parent household. My mom and my dad were married, but my dad left home when I was like 4 or 5 years old, so I can't really remember him too much in the household. So my mom raised me, so I can't say how it is in terms of both parents being there. I'm speaking from the standpoint my mom was there, and I will tell you this: that in my mom's case, my mom passed April 12, 1980, and that's 37 years ago, and I have never gotten over it. You will absolutely, I used to tell my students this, you absolutely will never get over the loss of your mom. You may be able to put it on the back burner because nature has a healing. A balm is not only in Gilead, there's a balm in time. And the healing is in the space between the injury and the amount of time between the injury and how much time you put between that and going forward. And it does put it at a place of rest, a place of quiet, but it is always an aching that will always be there. And all you have at that point is your memories. If you have good memories because you did things that you should have done to make the person proud that pain they went through was worth it because you made something out of your life, then you can live within the memory, which makes the pain a lot more palatable, because it is a sense of loss you'll always have.
My mom would say, because she lost her mom in a car accident. It was like unexpected, of course. She died my grandma was like 55, 59 years old when she got killed. But my mom said about her, reflecting on it, she goes, you get used to it, but you never get over it.
You never get over it.
Yeah, it's like, she says, it's like basically an analogy of, like you just alluded to, it's like it's still there, the pain's still there. It's like somebody losing a limb. They still think of the times it appears it's there, they're receiving signals, and that's what it is. My mom had a hard time dealing with it the rest of her life.
Yeah. It's a hard thing. One of the best movies about that I thought was one of the best movies I've seen about the relationship between your mom and the children was this movie starring Susan Sarandon, I think her name is Sarandon, and
Sarandon.
Sarandon.
Sarandon, yeah.
Sarandon, that's right. And the woman that was in, what's her name? That was in Pretty Woman. Who was that?
Julia Roberts.
Julia Roberts. The movie was called Stepmom, and that's one of the best movies I've ever seen. That movie has a tremendous plot to it, where there was the mom in the children's life, and the stepmom was coming into their life, and they had a little bit of friction there, but for the sake of the children, they had to make this thing work. The mom had gotten cancer and was sick and all of that, and her son asked her if she was dying. He said, "Are you dying?" And she said, "Not today." And he wanted to know where would she be? And she said, and she pointed her finger at his heart, and she said, "I will be in here." That movie was very, very important. And another movie that I thought was really on point was a movie that, and I'll be through with this point, and that is the movie called The Help. You know, that movie was really quite riveting to me because The Help, it was about these domestics working in the South in homes, and I saw for the first time. My mom was a domestic, by the way. She worked in, she had a 1 year of college. And by the way, one of her teachers was George Washington Carver at Tuskegee Institute. And I never could figure out what she did. I mean, I knew what a domestic is, because I know they, do things around the house and so on and so forth. You take care of the children, somebody's working. And you're working in their house while they're gone. You're taking care of the children. You're making sure you clean, you cook, and you wash the dishes, and you make sure the house is immaculate and things of that sort. But my mother never talked about her job. And she certainly never talked about the job in a disparaging way, because my mom looked at her job as something that allowed her to feed her kids and buy shoes that they would have for going to school. So she never talked about her job. Just that's her job. And she was proud. She's a worker, so she's proud to have a job. But she never discussed it. Just something that she did. When I was working, I was complaining about my job every day. I would come home and I just had to talk about my job and everything until the cows came home. My mama never discussed her job. She came home and then that's what she did, and went back the next day. And 5 days a week. That's what she did. And I didn't know what she did, quite frankly, until I saw it. I didn't have a understanding of all the aspects of what she did until I saw that movie, The Help. And I finally recognized in that movie what my mom went through on that job. And I have to tell you something, I'm a crybaby. Not like Chuck Schumer now. Those are crocodile tears. I'm a crybaby when it comes down to things that are sentimental. And I don't mean boo-hoo crying, but I have to tell you something. I carried some tissue. I carried some, do you call it? No, napkins. You better popcorn, you better pop. And I had some napkins. I have to tell you something. I was wetting those napkins throughout that movie. That movie just really got to me. And because I finally could see my mom in that. And I saw the dignity in those women, and that was nothing but my mom. So I really, I was glad the lights were down, because people saw me in that movie house. They would wonder, what's wrong with this guy? What is he in there? I wasn't making any noise. It was just that I just couldn't control. I could not control. I have to be honest here. The water, and I was dabbing and all of that. I was doing it very quietly. But it was really just a movie. Those two movies right there, I think that anyone who respects what their mother has done in their life, I think those two movies will really be riveting and just create a certain amount of intimacy that may not be there initially, but makes you understand your own situation a lot more. It certainly clarified a lot of things for me. Okay, well, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers, and I hope every one of you honored your mother. And when Father's Day comes up, it might be a little bit different from a lot of people, particularly with these broken homes right now. But hopefully you will have enough respect for moms and dads so that you pay some respect for them, so you'll have great memories when they're no longer here, because we are supposed to survive our parents. And we don't always do that because we don't listen to them and we don't really gain from their wisdom. When I really came to the studio today, although that's very important to me, what I really want to talk about today was a couple of things dealing with some of the events that are happening on the national level. I did want to bring you up to speed on a post that I did today. I always do my post before I come to the studio, or if I don't finish it, I definitely will start on it and get back to it after I finish my presentation here. But I did finish the one this morning, and what I'm writing about is this ongoing circus by the people that we have entrusted with the responsibility of running our government. And it is amazing that they continue to disrespect the American people with this noise they're making about the Russians having influenced an election in which 62 million people went to the polls and voted for Donald Trump. Not a single one of those voters, now we're talking about 62 million people plus, and not a single one has come out in the 6 months since the election. Yes, it's been 6 months since the election, on November the 8th, 2016. And we're still talking about the Russians did it. Yet we have not had one person out of all the voters that cast a ballot on November the 8th, 2016, we've not had one person that came out and said their vote was influenced by what was happening over in Moscow.
Yeah, Hillary sells uranium to the Russians. Nothing to see here, folks. Trump, we think, might have done something with the Russians. I mean, he might. I mean, I'm not going to say I don't know. I mean, I know definitively, but I mean, Hillary doing that alone should be a red flag. That, no pun intended, you know. But yeah, the only thing I think Donald Trump's ever got from the Russians was his wives. That's about it. I mean, he imports them from there, but and that's like you know. But anyway, I just
well, I saw the interview that Donald Trump did this weekend with Judge Jeanine and Judge Jeanine Pirro asked the question about Russia, and he was saying, not only, they said, well, do you believe these charges? He said, not only do I not believe in the charges, but none of the persons that have looked into it believe the charges. And he started naming James Clapper, former of the National Intelligence Agency. I mean, Michael Rogers. Michael Rogers is over Clapper's not there anymore, but he testified before the Congress. And then they had Michael Rogers, who's over the NSA, the National Security Administration, then the defrocked FBI director, James Comey, who was fired for cause in my view. But they asked him, and I think Trump scared him off. I'm going to see if he testifies today like they said he was going to do. Because when they fired him, they would now want him to come on Capitol Hill and testify about the firing. But I think Trump scared him off when he said that don't misunderstand your situation, because our conversation might well be on tape. Because according to Donald Trump, he asked him when they had dinner together if he was under investigation, and according to Donald Trump, James Comey said no. The question that is raised here, quite frankly, is if you are investigating those who are connected to the Russian, so-called Russian conspiracy, and the allegations that the Russians influenced the election, and there was a cohort situation between the Trump administration and Russia, then you got to start naming some names. And so I'll just simply ask the question: who do you know of that's being investigated? There are no people being investigated. And the reason why they've not come up with anything after 6 months, and they've been doing a probe at least for 9 weeks, meticulously looking at this situation, and have come up with zero to show for it. All of it is just allegations that continue to further to be nourished around the edges, nothing in the center to show that there's anything to it. And they're just keeping this thing alive, hoping to damage the Republican Party. And I know why they're doing it. They're doing it because they don't have anywhere to go. You know, you can say what you want to about Donald Trump, and he's not a perfect candidate. Carries a lot of baggage, but he's staked out on all the issues that the American people are interested in: the wall, lowering taxes, Obamacare, securing the borders, immigration. All those issues have already been taken. So what are the issues of the party that's been decimated? Because those are the issues, and they will not talk about those issues. Where with this party has been decimated over the last 8 years, where are they going to go in 2018? They don't have anywhere to go. The only thing they would have is this impeachment cloud that Maxine Waters is raising. Somebody ought to raise the question of impeaching Maxine Waters. They don't have nowhere to go. They got to continue to run this narrative because there are no issues they can run on. And if there are any issues they can run on, what are those issues? They can't run on Obamacare. And they certainly can't run on what they're doing with immigration, because what they're doing with immigration is letting their voters come in here because the Democratic Party has lost the debate in this country. Once you look at what the Democratic Party is offering, I mean, Bernie Sanders, are you kidding me? And then Hillary Clinton, who had to sabotage Bernie Sanders through what they did with the primaries. They stole the election from him during the primary. He would win a state, and all of a sudden he would come out with this many votes, and she would have that. Hillary Clinton would have this many votes, and she has all the delegates. He didn't have any delegates, and yet he won in that particular state because the delegates don't have to vote the way necessarily that the voters went, because they have these super delegates. And what are the super delegates? They are checkmates. The super delegates are the delegates that cancel out those who are, you say the super delegates, who are the other delegates? They're the peon delegates. And so the super delegates up here can cancel out their voice because their voice is not supposed to be the primary voice. It's the party voice. And that's one thing that I learned during this time. I didn't understand the property ownership of these two parties. These are property possessions. And that was made very clear during this election. So they don't have nowhere to go. And what they're doing is they're keeping this narrative alive with no evidence, and they're making the allegation the evidence, and not putting closure to it. And the American people got to be smart enough to reject that. And in 2018, if they are smart enough to reject this, not that either party is worth anything. I mean, let me say another thing here. We're not voting for the lesser of two evils. Both parties are equally bad. If you want to say evil, okay, I can use that word as well. Both parties are equally evil. What we're voting for is a party that will do the less damage. Two evil parties, we're voting for which one will do the least amount of damage. They both are damage. They both damage us. They both are dangerous to the country's well-being. and neither party has the best interests of the country at heart. There are no patriots in those parties. There are some that are constitutionalists, but not patriots. Ted Cruz is a very smart man, and he is a constitutional scholar. Now, if he was a patriot, he'd be willing to follow the Constitution in his own life, and that would be that he would be willing to say that he is constitutionally ineligible to run for president of the United States. And I don't care what Mark Levine says. I have a lot of respect for Mark Levine's brilliance, but Mark Levine will not get in my face and say what he's saying out there on his radio program to people that don't know not only Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5, but also does not know about the Naturalization Act that was passed 2 years after the ratification of the Constitution. And I know what they're saying about it, but they better understand what I'm saying about it. Because what they missed in looking at the Naturalization Act of 1790, see, the Constitution was ratified in 1788. And the framers recognized that they had put a restriction in the Constitution that prohibited some of the ones that were at the Constitutional Convention from running for president. And they tried to pass an act that would remedy that situation. And they called it the Naturalization Act of 1790. And they saw this, and this is what Mark Levine misses. He says, well, the only place, this is what they say, the only place where they actually said anything about what they meant by natural born is in the Naturalization Act of 1790. It's the only place where natural born was mentioned and dealt with and what they meant by it and so on and so forth. But when they repeal the naturalization of 1790 and they did that 5 years later in 1795, they took that out of there. And let me tell you why they took it out. They took it out of there because they recognized that you cannot amend the Constitution with an act of Congress. And that's why you find trying to rectify the limitation on who could run for president in Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5. They try to remedy that 2 years later in the Naturalization Act, but coming to their senses, they recognize you can't amend the Constitution through an act of Congress. The way you amend the Constitution through Article 5 is that you have to have 2/3 of both houses of Congress and then have it ratified. We can have it done different ways there too in terms of the proposal, but the only way it's ever been done is that 2/3 of both houses of Congress propose an amendment and then 3/4 of states have ratified the amendment. All 27 amendments have gone through that process. There's another process to go through too, but that's the way we've had all the amendments placed in the Constitution. 2/3 of the House, there would be 290, and then 2/3 of the senators would be 6 or 7, and then once 2/3 have joined on to the amendment of the Constitution in both houses and they agree upon the language, because the language must be congruent in both houses through maybe reconciliation, then it's referred to the states, so the states then can endorse whether they go along with the people in Washington. You see how it goes back to the states? Okay, that's what I'm coming to in a minute, and what I came to say here in this last part of this program, because I'm coming to a point I want to make. But you see how it goes. Once they've done the work in Washington, and it was intended for the Senate which would be the voice of the states. That's no longer the case because of the 17th Amendment, which was added to the Constitution in 1913. And we now have the 17th Amendment. One of the biggest mistakes that was made was taking the senators out of the way in which they're elected, which was by state legislatures. And the states are sending their own representatives up there to the Senate.
Was that really ratified? Somebody posted on Facebook that ratified.
It was done through a trick. And so was the 16th Amendment, but different tricks. In the 17th Amendment, the trick was to wait until some person went home. And behind people's back, that's what they did. And then sometimes what they would do, and what they did in the 16th Amendment, was declare it to be ratified when it wasn't ratified. And you go back and read some of the notes, and you see that this idea of ratification. How would you know? See, anytime you have the federal government that's able to determine for itself, without any overseers, what is legitimated. And the ones that decide upon the legitimization are the ones who are making the claims of legitimization. When it's the same folks, then you have a problem on your hand. And that's why they wanted to have checks and balances with the states looking over the state. It wasn't supposed to sit at the federal level. See how it works, John? You see what happens when they ratify the Constitution? You see the federal level would be, even though we got the senators up there representing the states at that point, they wanted to go to the states, though, where the state could look over their shoulders at the state level, right? And they would have to, in fact, ratify it. They can propose it in Washington. But in order for it to be ratified, 38 states, there are 50 states now, 38 states have to say that they approve of that, and if they don't. And I would ask people this question here. If you don't think the states were supposed to have been in primary charge of the government, because out of their on, I don't want to say personhood, but in a way it is personhood, because it is the people who make up the states. And so in the personage of the states, then out of that comes the creation of the federal government. And because it is the child, the offspring, the federal government is, of the states, therefore, like a parent, they must oversee what the child does. And that's why they had the child of the states come back to ask the mother of the federal government, the mother of it, what does the mother, the states, say about what the child has done? And there are 50 different children that had to say yes or no. That's a day. There were 13 at the point of the ratification of the Constitution.
I just saw something on Facebook you might want to know, that the FBI is the guy came up with a new thing. It's all 62 million of people who voted for Trump are all Russian agents. All 62 million people.
Yeah, I saw that today, John. Yeah, we've all become agents of the Russians, and that's what they tell us because they don't respect us.
Same thing is, I don't understand now that anger and angst about on the left towards the Russia, because when I was growing up, it was the left always telling us we have this misconception. It's the media that could depicts Russia, life in Russia. I even had a teacher when I was in junior high who used to have issues of Soviet life in the news rack there in the classroom. She was a Soviet sympathizer, which, if you know anybody about that now in retrospect, they'll only admit that it was there were a bunch of fluff pieces in there. It was written for an English-speaking audience. But, so it's like, why are they so totally, opposed to, is because finally Russia walked away from communism? I mean, is that why they have such I think it's bigotry, man. I mean, that's all it is bigotry,
Yeah, one of the things that happened in terms of this whole thing of Russia, the question back in that time period was the proving ground of the socialist idea had not become as well known as it is right now. See, don't forget that the first one that tried to apply some of what Karl Marx wrote in 1848 was in the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917 in Russia. And so because of the incubation of the idea, it had to run its course. And you go back and look at some of these people here that were going over to Russia. The Harlem Renaissance people, for example, going over to Russia, they just thought this was candy over there because the egalitarian principles of it, ruling by the proletariat, the oppression of the capitalist class, is what they were saying about the capitalist society, where all the money was at the top and the power was concentrated. And so people thought that the idea of egalitarianism, which is what they were saying, and from each according to what he can do, to each according to his needs. It sounds good on paper. It's never worked anywhere. But until you know that, until you have enough proof and evidence that that is a fait accompli at the very beginning of it, but you have to have it play out before you're aware of it. It sounds very good in terms of the theory. The empirical evidence, though, is Venezuela. And before that, it was the 5-year plan in Russia. Every time they would get to the 5-year plan that they had before that and it failed, then they had another 5-year plan. And so that goes on for a while. But after you have that going on for so long, at some point you begin to wake up to, hey, something's wrong with the idea, with the theoretical that's involved in it. I mean, Mao ran that for 27 years. From 1949, when Mao came out of the mountains and came down to Beijing and took over power, had these 5-year programs, right? But 60 million people later, we can see it did not work. And when Mao died in 1976, what happened? There was a power struggle that went on with Xi Jinping, and they put in place some of the capitalist models inside of the communist structure. In other words, the state did not want to take its hands completely off of the throttles of economic power and development. But it knew that what it had done in terms of de-incentivizing production, that could not be continued. Why? Because they had all these 5-year programs over the course of 27 years, and it did not work. And so that's what they had to do. In terms of getting some production, they had to put some capitalism in there. Let me just say this before we close down for the day. I want you, and we'll talk about this next week, I want you to go and read Article 3, Section 2, which states what the courts can take ownership of without it being appealed to the court. It will have jurisdiction without it being an appellate jurisdiction. They have jurisdiction over the case. And one of them was disputes between persons in one state suing another state. That was in the Constitution, and they gave that to the Supreme Court. They took it away from them, though, in Amendment 11. Go read Amendment 11. Check that with Article 3, Section 2, and then go read Amendment 11, where they took that back, where the courts don't have that. And next week, what we're going to talk about here is what is happening in this country here in terms of judicial supremacy. And I want to show you how that is a taking of power that does not belong to the judicial system. Okay, well, we have talked about a couple of things here, and we're glad we were able to start with our parents, our mom, and from yesterday, and hope you will, in fact, honor your parents every day. Until next week, we want you to follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.